Hi, I'm Rick Dior, and today we're going to talk about mixing up the ride cymbal rhythm. So this is something I've really been into since I was a young player attempting to learn how to play jazz. I used to hear drummers like Roy Haynes, DeJohnette do this kind of thing, and I loved it. So what I did was I bought lots and lots of records. Chicory is Now He Sings, Now He Sobs, a lot of early DeJohnette records on ECM, and I studied them and I transcribed them. And not just the solos, I actually transcribed the time playing. And sometimes these charts that I wrote would be like 20 pages long of the whole tune, trying to figure out what exactly they were doing and how they were getting that sound. So Roy Haynes, as you all know, is probably one of my favorite drummers, because I've said it many times before on this channel. And he used a small flat ride. This is a small flat ride. This is a Paiste Traditional 18-inch flat ride. It's got a couple rivets. And this is similar to what Roy used. I believe he used a 602, which is very close in sound to this. So today I'll be using this so you could hear the cymbal really clearly. I'll also be using this old Premier Royal Ace snare drum, which is a good drum for this kind of stuff because you could tune it up high. It's a 4x14. It's got kind of that snap, crackle, pop sound that Roy Haynes had. And together, these instruments sound really nice. So I'll be using mostly this cymbal and this snare drum. Well, definitely the snare drum. We'll go to my other cymbals at certain points in the video. So let's talk about how I teach this, because how I learned it is kind of evil to make a student write out that much music. So I came up with ways of teaching this over many years, and it's difficult because you can't just tell a student, you know, just play this pattern, just play that pattern, and that'll work. Because our hands will fall into these repetitive rhythms. That's just because we're human, and we'll tend to repeat ourselves a lot. And the idea is not to sound monotonous like that. So you have to work on individual components of the patterns. So obviously all of you know, if you've been watching this channel, about jazz coordination, because I've done about 20 videos on it. And I've showed you how to work on this using my book, especially particular rhythms. But if you haven't seen those videos, we're going to go over this pretty quickly. So if we go to page 8, and I'll post it on the screen here. We'll just do a couple lines, and I'll show you quickly the process that I use using the regular ding-ding-da-ding pattern. So if we take page 8, and we'll put the metronome on 110, because you always want to play 2 and 4 with the metronome. And what we're going to do is we're going to just play the left hand on page 8, just a couple lines. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you see that I'm interpreting these 16th notes as triplets, okay? So once you have that down with your left hand, you can go up and down snare drum, bass drum, kind of alternating like this. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now the beauty of this is that there's many, many books with these kinds of rhythms in there. So you'll never run out of material. So it's not just syncopation, which is just eighth notes and quarter notes. There's lots and lots of books with 16th note rhythms, many, many more. that you can work on. So that's why I use this concept with these kinds of rhythms. So let's talk about some different patterns we can use so you can learn how to mix up your cymbal. And by mixing up, I mean playing different rhythms, obviously, not just the straight ding, ding, da, ding. The first one is doing that backwards, like this. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's 2/16 and an eighth note. And if we play the first two lines of page 8 like that, here's what it sounds like. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you see the difference there. It's confusing because usually you're so used to playing the regular ride pattern. When you do that, you get all confused. But again, the idea is not to let your hands fall into all these repetitive patterns. And this is how you do it. Now, if we slow that down a little to quarter note equals 180, and then we do up and down like we did before, this is what that sounds like. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's what that sounds like, up and down with the opposite cymbal pattern. And then what I suggest is just playing and just try to use both those patterns. And that might sound something like this. And you want to focus on that ride. Don't worry too much about what your snare drum's doing. You can play bass drum 4 on the floor lightly. And just practice like that without any music for quite some time. Now, the next way I like to teach this is with single rhythms. And what we do is we double up the cymbal on the E's and the U's. So, in other words, this is kind of complicated. If you go to page 7 and you play these single note rhythms with the snare drum, on certain notes, you're going to double up on the ride like this. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Sometimes you can even play a real fast 30-second note like I did. You slip that in there every once in a while. It sounds pretty neat. Okay, so hopefully you understand that I'm varying my ride cymbal, but when I'm playing my left hand, it's goosing along that ride. Now, when you play that fast, it sounds really cool. Very, very aggressive sounding, very modern sounding. So that's the other way I suggest practicing these. Now finally, the last way I teach them is to do doubling between the bass drum and the cymbal. So in other words, unisons. So I did this straight in that ECM video where I went. So now we're going to do it swung, okay? So here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. So that's the first 7 lines of that. Again, really effective for certain things. It doesn't need to be real neat and clean. It could be kind of funky and almost a little sloppy. Working that into your playing, it sounds like this. Now we're getting into Jack DeJohnette territory. Very aggressive, lots of doubling, very powerful playing. Tony Williams also does this kind of thing quite often. So these are kind of the post-bop drummers. Lots and lots of drummers. You know, Jeff Watts uses it, Eric Harlan, even Kenny Washington. Every once in a while you hear him do that stuff. So, you know, try to listen to as many different drummers as possible, because that's the language of drumming, learning how to play all these things that have evolved over these past 80 years or so as far as modern jazz drumming goes. So that'll do it for this video. I hope I explained a little so you can understand my concept for developing these kinds of things. It takes some time, but you have to do a ton of listening to hear how these things are applied. So I'll play a little and we'll call it a day.